Hello and welcome to Learn Coding Tutorials. In this video, we're going to build a to-do app using the mean stack. This is the app right here, but first let's go through our stack, which includes MongoDB for the database, Express as middleware for Node, Angular for the front end, and Node for the back end. Along the way, we're also going to throw in some other hip and awesome things like Webpack, which is a build tool, SASS, which is a CSS preprocessor, Babel /ES6 for better JavaScript syntax, and UI router for routing for Angular. And we're also going to throw in some stuff with Angular factories and more, which we'll explain along the way. This tutorial is for everyone, both beginners and non-beginners, because we're going to try to build this app the right way, making sure our code is scalable and maintainable. So there's going to be some complexity to this app. At the same time, everything is going to be explained so anyone can follow along. The extra work we put into this app is going to be completely worth it, and we're going to learn a lot and have a lot of fun building this app. Before we go any further, let's take a look at what we'll be building. Here is the app with some very basic Bootstrap styling. First, we have some basic CRUD operations. We can create a task, let's say wash dishes, and you can notice the fancy Angular two-way binding magic we have going on here. So as I type, it's live updating here. And so let's create the task. And since we're using MongoDB as our database, the tasks that we enter will actually persist in the browser. So if we refresh it, it will still be there. And so let's enter some more. Walk the dog and clean the house. We can check these checkboxes to have strike-throughs through them, stuff like that. So reading from the database is when you refresh it, we're grabbing this data from the database. We can also update. So if we click edit, we can do wash dishes tomorrow. We can click save, or we could press enter. So we could do walk the dog now, enter. When you click edit, you can cancel, do stuff like that. And then finally, we have our delete. So we can delete our to-do tasks like that. And here's the empty state, nothing to do. So we will build all that. And next, we also can have routing in our app. So we can click on the about. There's nav links to do to kind of demonstrate how the UI router works. So that's basically the app that we'll be building. Now let's get started. By the way, here's the GitHub repository, which can also be used to jumpstart an app that you're building. There will also be a link to this repo in the description below. But for this tutorial, I would recommend that you type out all of the code yourself because that's a good learning experience. So let's get started. Step 1. If you do not have Node and npm installed, let's do that. You can download and install them both together by going to nodejs.org. I already have them installed, so I won't be doing that here. Once you have them installed, you can check that they've been properly installed by opening up a terminal and typing, let's clear this first. Let's type node-v. You can see that I have a version here and it matches this version right here. I can type in npm-v and I have a version there. Make sure those show up in your terminal. Step 2, let's create the directory that our app will live in. I'm going to call it mean to do app. So I'm going to do mkdir make dir mean to do app. You can also create this directory manually, but I like using the terminal because it's faster and it is cooler. So now I'm going to navigate into this directory in my terminal. So cd mean to do app, and now I'm in the directory. Step 3. Now let's create a package.json file, which will contain all of our dependencies and allow others to build our app easily. This is essential if we want to share our code or bring on other developers, which is basically what you have to do as a developer. We could create it manually by just creating it in our folder, or we can just type npm init, and there's a shortcut -y just to say yes to everything. And you can see that this is going to be our package.json file. Step 4. Let's open up the directory and file that we just created in our favorite text editor. My favorite one is Sublime Text, which you can download for free here, and I would highly recommend it because it is amazing. So just go to sublimetext.com, download it. So now let's open up the directory in Sublime. So I'm just going to go here and I'm going to do open, and my folder is right. We're just going to open it like that. And you can see that we have our package.json here. And it really doesn't have anything in it yet, but we are going to change that soon. Step 5. Let's install Express, which is middleware for Node, which basically means that it's a wrapper for Node that makes Node easier to use. We can install Express by typing npm-i, or npm-i, which stands for install, -save, or -s, which is the same thing as --save, which will save it to our package.json, Express. We'll type that in our terminal, and we'll wait for that to install. And you can see now that Express is now a part of our dependencies list. Step 6. Let's now set up the basics of our server by following these steps. First, let's create a server.js file. So let's do touch server.js. Again, you can create that manually if you would like. And in this server.js file, we are first going to import our Express dependency, and we do that by using the require Express here. That's how you pull in dependencies using Express. Next, we're going to define a variable called app, which is going to use Express, so we're just going to call Express right there. And then next, we are going to define a route at the root of our app, so app.all. Basically, this is just going to mean that any route that we enter into the browser, we are going to respond with this code right here. This stands for request and respond. So basically, we just want to match any route. And we're going to respond with some HTML here. And for our HTML, we're just going to put it directly in our server instead of in a separate file. And I'll explain why in a little bit when we get to that point. But this is going to make our code in the future a little bit cleaner. We want to make our HTML look a little bit nicer than just one single string. So we're going to use multiple lines. And when we use multiple lines in JavaScript, we need to use backslashes at the end of every line. We can get around this by using ES6 string interpolation, which we'll use on our front end, but we're not going to use it here. This is just a good opportunity just to learn how to do it without ES6. So we're just going to create a basic HTML structure. So we'll just put, this is just going to be boilerplate code. It's going to be kind of tedious to type, but just follow along, and it's just going to be what we do. And the backslashes are kind of tedious as well, but it's just part of what we're doing here. So here we go. I'm going to have heads. In our head, we're going to have a title. Let's just call it mean to do app. And we'll close the title tag there. And this is just basic boilerplate HTML. And we'll have a body here. We'll have a new line here. Body. And let's just put it's just a placeholder here. We're not going to leave this in here, but just to have something show up on the page when we run our server. Hello, this is the app. We're just putting something completely random here that we'll take out later. Put backslash there. And then next, we're going to want our server to listen on a port. And so I'm just going to define a variable called port up here. And I'm going to throw process.m.port at the beginning there, which will be used if we wanted to deploy our app. So it's just good practice to just throw that at the front of everything, all of our port numbers. We're not going to use it for our development, but it's just good practice. And then we're going to listen on that port, so app.listen. And then let's have a callback function here to let us know when our server has started running so that we know that. We're just going to console log server running on, and we're going to say port right there. And now we can test this out by running server or node server in our terminal. And you will see this thing that we logged here. And let's now go to our browser. We can go to localhost 3000, and we can see the app or the HTML that we output in our server. So that is how we set up our Express server. Step number 7. By the way, these steps are kind of arbitrary, so don't pay too much attention about how I'm dividing them up. For our client-side code, we are going to use Webpack to compile and bundle it all into one convenient file, which will make our app faster. And we will also use Webpack Dev Server to make development more convenient for us. To use Webpack and Webpack Dev Server, we first need to install them globally by typing this into our terminal. Let's first close the server by doing Control-C right there. We do npm I, and I stands for install. I is just a short form for that. -G, this is going to mean that we're going to install this globally on our computer, and we need to do that for Webpack and Webpack Dev Server. And these take a little while to install, and so I'm going to skip ahead while they install right here. All right, so now they've finished installing. Next, what we want to do is we want to install them locally in our directory. And to do that, we're going to do npm i-d. The -d is the same thing as --save dev, which means that we're going to save these as dev dependencies, which basically means that they're not actually essential to our app. They're just used for development, and they're only relevant for when we actually, if we were to deploy our app, then the post-install script would only install the dependencies that are necessary for our app, and not the dev dependencies. But it's not really too important for what we're doing here, but it's just good practice to figure out how to differentiate between our dependencies and our dev dependencies. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to install Webpack and Webpack dev server. And again, I'm just going to skip ahead while these install. All right, so these have now finished installing. Step 8, we are going to use modern ES6 syntax for our front end, which includes some cool features that normal JavaScript doesn't have. To do this, we'll need to install 2 more dev dependencies. So let's type this into our terminal, npm i-d. It's going to be Babel loader. And loaders are what Webpack uses to load particular files. And Babel preset ES 2015. And this just kind of defines the syntax that we're going to want to be using. And so again, I'm just going to skip ahead while these download. All right, so these have finished installing. Step 9. What we're going to do now is we're going to create a file called webpack.config.js, which is going to be our configuration file for Webpack. So first, let's do touch webpack.config.js, and that's going to show up in our Sublime. So let's open up that file. What we're going to do here is we're going to set it up. There's going to be a lot of boilerplate code here, so don't worry too much if you don't understand it all. I don't even understand it all. Some of it I just kind of found online, and it just works. So I'll explain what I can, and the parts that I can't explain, just follow along and don't worry too much about it. So first we pull in some dependencies. We're going to pull in Webpack and path. Path is just used to manipulate and manage file paths a little bit more easily. We don't technically need it, but it just makes for convenient management of directories. Module.exports is going to be used to export our config file. And then DevTool, inline source map. This is just going to output line numbers for better debugging during development. We wouldn't use that for production, but we're just doing development right now. Entry, this is going to define where Webpack is going to look for the entry file to load. And we're actually going to be using Webpack dev server. And I'm not exactly sure what this code does, but it's just kind of setting up Webpack dev server stuff. And this HTTP 127.0.1 just stands for localhost. I think we could probably just put localhost there too. But this is just kind of the config that I found somewhere online, so we'll just use it this way. Hot basically represents it's going to help us with development, because hot is going to be some live reloading that we're going to be using. And the actual entry file, this is the important part of our entry, is /src. And so we're going to be looking for a file in our src folder that's going to be our actual entry point. And the fact that I'm not putting a file name here, it means it's just going to look for a default file called index.js, or just index. And so we're going to name a file called index a little bit later on. Output, this is going to be the path that Webpack is going to be looking in to bundle our app, this is where it's going to put the bundled app or bundled file that we compile. And so the path is going to be, we're going to create a folder called public. This is going to be the folder that we put our bundled file in. And the file name that we're going to call it is going to be bundle.js. That's just pretty standard. You can name it anything you want, but it's pretty common practice to name it bundle. And we have resolve. This is where Webpack is going to look for files. And there's something called modules directories. And it's going to look in the node modules folder, as well as in our src folder that we're going to create in a little bit. Extensions is just going to define what extensions Webpack should expect to find. And right now we just have these two right here. And then module, we're going to define our loaders here. And this is the way that we do it. It's going to be an array of loaders. And our first one is going to be just to, well, the only one that we're going to use right now is just going to be to test for JS files, because that's all we're going to have right now. And we're going to exclude our node modules. And this is the syntax for doing that. And then we are going to use a loader Babel. And since we only have one loader, we can use this query option here. If we had more than one loader, we would add options at the end here, but we can just use query here. And we're going to use the ES 2015 syntax that we installed earlier. And finally, we're just going to include some code at the bottom that has to do with our Webpack dev server and how that's going to load plugins. So we have new webpack.hot module replacement plugin. Not sure exactly what that is. Something to do with the library loading and the hot loading. And the webpack.noerrors plugin. I think this just basically means that if there's an error, Webpack's not going to compile the file, which means that we need to make sure that we fix our errors. And then we have dev server, and we're going to do hot true. Again, this is just for development. If we were to do production, we would create a different config file that wouldn't include this development code. Proxy just means that we're just going to define where Webpack dev server is going to look for a server to run on. And remember, our server is running on localhost 3000, so we're going to put that here. So now our Webpack config should be set up. Let's test it out by just typing in our terminal here, Webpack dev server, and you'll see that, oh, we forgot to create our src file, so I'm just going to go here and create a new folder called src, and in this we're going to create a new file called index.js, which is going to be our entry point for our app. And in this entry.js, let's just do a test. So ES6 has the let keyword, or let instead of doing var message, ES6 lets us do something called let, which is basically, it just helps us to identify our variables better. Actually, let's do const, because this is not going to be mutated, equals, let's just do hello from the entry file. And let's just console log message here. And we're just doing this just to make sure that our ES6 syntax is working. And we did say that our output would be in the public folder. So let's go ahead and create that folder. Webpack dev server actually isn't going to create the file, so we don't actually need this right now, but we will need it for production if we wanted to actually compile the file. With Webpack dev server, it's going to compile the file kind of virtually, and so it'll run our app using a virtual file that it creates. So it's not actually going to output it here. It's going to just be kind of a magical creation of that. And next, since we are going to be outputting a file called bundle.js in public, we need to include that in our HTML here. So let's include a script here that pulls in our bundle.js. And we will close the script tag here. And then next, let's test this all out by running Webpack dev server in our terminal. Now we want to run both our server and Webpack dev server because our server is going to serve the HTML and a Webpack dev server is going to serve our client-side code. So we'll do node server and Webpack dev server. And you can see that this compiled stuff here. So our dev server actually runs on localhost 8080. So let's go there in our browser. And we should see the message that we are console logging here, hello from the entry file. And let's just really quickly test out the hot reloading. And hopefully it'll work. So let's go to index.js. Let's change this message. Let's just add some exclamation points, and I'm going to save it. And you should see this automatically save. And oh, it says it needs full reload. I guess it loads CSS automatically, but JavaScript, we do need to do a page refresh. We wouldn't need to with React, but this is Angular, so I guess there's something different here. Step 10. Before we move any further, let's define a script for running the Webpack dev server to make things easier in the future. To do this, let's open up our package.json file, and we're going to remove this test line here, which doesn't actually do anything right now. We're going to replace it first with a start script, and we can run start with npm run start or npm start. Other scripts we would need to run with npm run, whatever we define it as. And for our start script, we're going to put in what we use to start our server, which is going to be node server. But we're also going to put in something at the beginning here, which will make our client-side code a little bit easier to write. We're going to define a base path for node to look for files in. So when we require files in our front end, we can just use this base path. And we'll kind of see how this works a little bit more when we get to the front end code. So we're going to have that. And again, we're going to have our code look in our src folder as our default folder. And then underneath that, we're going to run the code to run our dev server. So it's going to be dev, and we would run that with npm run dev. And to do that, we do want to run our server. So we're going to do npm start, which is going to include this code up here. And then we're going to do Webpack dev server. And we're going to include two flags here, progress and colors, which will just make the output look a little bit nicer. These are pretty standard. So when we output it, we'll kind of see what that looks like. And now we should be able to run our Webpack dev server with npm run dev. So I'm going to close our server with Control C. I'm going to do npm run dev. Something's going to go wrong here because, as you can see here, there's errors here. And we have this E address in use already. So for some reason, I think doing Control C didn't close the server. If you get that, you can fix that problem with just something called kill all-9 node. So that will kill all of our node servers. And let's just try running npm run dev again. And this time, and apparently I forgot to put an and here. We want to run both of them. It's not all the same command. So Control C, and let's try that again, npm run dev. And you'll see that everything is running properly here. And now we can go to our localhost 8080 again, and it will load our app the same way as before. So now all we need to do is do npm run dev to run our server. We can do that as many times as we want. Now I think the E address in use thing will not show up again. So this will help us save time in the future when we want to run our Webpack dev server. Step 11. Now we're going to set up Angular and UI router, which is a router for Angular. To do this, let's first install two dependencies. So first Control C here, Angular and Angular router, Angular UI router here. And we'll just wait for those to install. I don't think they should take too long. Yeah, they're going pretty quickly, so I won't need to skip ahead. Next, let's install a dev dependency called raw loader that Webpack is going to use to read HTML template files. So we'll do npm I. We're going to use -d here and raw loader. This just turns the template file into a string that Webpack can use. We'll wait for that to install. Next, let's update our webpack.config.js to be able to load HTML files. So let's go to our webpack.config.js, and down here we are just going to add another loader. And so we're going to have an object here, test, and this time it's going to be for HTML files. And our loader is just going to be raw. Pretty simple there. Next, let's create a config.js file where our main Angular module is going to live and where we will configure our routes. So let's do touch, and it's going to be in our src right here. So src/config.js. And in this file, here's what we're going to put. First, we will import Angular. Again, this is ES6 syntax that we wouldn't have with normal JavaScript. If we did normal JavaScript, we would use require, which isn't that different from this. We're going to import UI router from Angular UI router here. And then now let's define our module. So const app equals angular.module. And this is just the syntax for creating an Angular module. We'll just name this module app. And we will include the UI router dependency here. And then we will do app.config. This is config for UI router. So we're going to pull in state provider, which is included in Angular, URL router provider. And then we're also going to include location provider, which is going to make our URLs look nicer, and I'll explain that in a little bit. And this is ES6 function syntax. Notice we're not even using the word function there. It's just parentheses, double arrows. This is the same thing as if we did something like function, state provider, blah, 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 and then this down here. It's just kind of cleaner syntax that ES6 uses, which is nice. So our config, we're going to define our routes here. So let's do URL. This is just going to be kind of a default. If we load any other route, it's just going to go back to our base route, or base root of our app, and then we're going to have state provider. And now here we're going to define our routes. So state, let's have our home page, or home route be just our to-dos, and it's going to, the URL is going to be just the root URL, and the template, we're going to use a file that we haven't created yet. It's just going to be todos/todos.html. So that's all we'll have in here for now. And then we're going to have one more state. We're not actually going to use this in our app, but this is just to demonstrate how the UI router is going to work. So we're just going to have an about page, and the URL is going to be at about, and the template we're going to require about/about.html. And then Down here, we are going to make our URLs look better. If we don't have this, there's going to be a hash in our URLs, and that doesn't look very nice. So we're going to just do HTML5 mode true, which will make our URLs look nicer. So, and then at the bottom here, we want to export our app variable so that we can import it into our index.js file. Export default app right there. Next, we're going to update our index.js file to pull in this dependency and then bootstrap it to our HTML. So we're going to take this out. I said that we wouldn't use that. So let's first import Angular from Angular. So we're going to be using that variable. And then we're going to import, we'll just call it app module, since that's what that's what it is, from config. We named it config because that's where our configuration for our routes is. And then we're just going to do angular.bootstrap. And what this is going to do is just kind of attach the Angular module to the document, which is in our HTML, and then app module.name. That's just kind of the syntax for doing that. And so that's this file. Next, let's update our original HTML file. We're going to need to do some other things to be able to use UI router. First, with the location provider that we have here, we need to add something to our head here. We're going to need to add a base ref here. This just makes location provider work. And then down here, instead of this placeholder code, we're going to have something called div UI view. This is what UI router uses to load the views that we define in the config file. And next, let's create the template files that we defined in our config.js. So let's create a folder called to-dos. In this folder, let's create a to-dos.html, and let's take a look at what we want in here. And let's just do something very simple to test out our router. We're going to change this, at least for our to-dos, in the future. And so this is just placeholder code. And the way that UI router uses checks for the routes is it's going to be UI/ref. That's just kind of what it uses to match the config routes to what we have in our DOM here. And it will be, let's just have a link to the about page here. And so this will go to the about page. And so we'll close that there. And then we'll say that this page is the to-do app. Oh, and this folder should actually go inside of the src folder here. So let's move that there. And then let's create our about folder. By the way, you might not have all of these options here. I have something called sidebar enhancements that gives me additional options there, but you can always go to Finder or to Windows Explorer and change that. All right, about.html. And we're going to do basically the same thing here. So let's copy, paste this, and this time this link will be to the to-dos, and then this is the about page. Let's just add a message here. We're not going to do anything with the about page. We'll just say the only purpose of this page is to demonstrate Angular routing. All right, so now let's test out what we've written by going to our terminal and just doing npm run dev and just see if it all fits together. Oh, and apparently I messed up my syntax in here. What this should actually be is module, so an object and then loaders, and then this array should go in that loaders, or for that loaders key. So, and then let's bump this over, and then let's take that away. So let's try that again. npm run dev, and it looks like everything's bundled correctly. Let's go to our localhost 8080, and yay, debugging. So the problem is that in our config file, this should actually be otherwise. So let's try that again. Go to our terminal, let's Control-C, npm run dev, it's bundling. And let's try to load this again. And now we see these links, and let's try clicking about. It's going to go to about, and then to-dos, it's going to go back to to-dos. Okay, so that didn't work, and the reason why, more debugging, is because for this about page, the link to the to-dos should actually go to to-dos here, because you'll see in our config file, the state should be to-dos. So obviously going to the about page from the about page will not work. Let's try that again, npm run dev, and then it's going to build our bundle. And let's go back to the root of our app just to start from the beginning. We click about, goes to the About page, click To-Dos, goes back. We can go back and forth like that. And it works after some good debugging. This is actually good because it shows us that writing code does not always go the way that we expect it to. One last thing, let me just kind of show you what happens if we took out this location provider. Show you what the URLs would look like. If I were to refresh this here, you'll notice that there is a hash here. When I click on About, there's a hash here, which looks kind of ugly. And so what this location provider does is it takes away the hash. And you'll notice that I don't need to rebuild or anything. It's automatically recompiling down here so that things work the way we want them to. So that is one thing that's really cool about Webpack. Step 12. Now let's set up SASS for our app, which is a CSS preprocessor that makes CSS much more enjoyable and simple to write. We're not going to spend a lot of time with CSS for this tutorial, but it's just good to know how to get SASS set up for an app. So first, let's install some dev dependencies. There's going to be quite a few here, so just follow along. So we have, let's do Control-C here, npm i-d, and it's going to be, we're going to have CSS loader, style loader, SASS loader, node SASS, and auto prefixer loader. And while we wait for these, let me just explain them. So auto prefixer will automatically add browser prefixes to CSS that needs them. And the other dependencies basically compile our SASS code into CSS and then injects it into our HTML code. And I'm going to skip ahead while this installs. All right, so these have finished installing. Next, let's update our webpack.config.js to recognize SCSS files, which is the extension that SASS uses. So we're going to add a new loader down here and do an object. The test is going to be SCSS files. And we are going to actually add this to our list up here. So .scss, and down here are the loaders that we are going to use for this one. We're going to set up an array of loaders this time. We're going to have style, CSS, and we have auto prefixer, browse. This is just an option that you can use, and I just found this online. So I don't know exactly the difference between all of these. I just know that they all work together to compile CSS for Webpack. So this is just another option that I found online. So that is how we set up our Webpack file to recognize SASS files. Oh, we need an S here. Next, let's test it out really quickly by adding a class to our navigation links so that we can style them a little bit. So let's just add in a class. We'll just call it nav link. And we'll do the same thing with the to-dos here. Class nav link. And now let's create a CSS folder. And in this CSS folder, let's create a file called master.scss, which is going to be our master SASS file. And let's just really quickly style our nav link. And let's style it with a float right. Let's make it float at the right. And then let's give it a little bit of margin at the top so that it's not at the way top. We'll save it. Now let's rerun our server. npm run dev, and it's bundled. And now let's reload our page. Oh, and we forgot to import in the SASS file in our index file here. So let's go to index.js, and we just need to do import css/master.scss. We will save that, and now let's refresh our browser here. Now we can see that the link is on the right side here, and if we click it, it will do that. Let's just really quickly try some live reloading. And so let's go back to our master.scss. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. And let's do margin right here. So margin right, let's just give it 50 pixels to make it less all the way over there. You'll see that it moves automatically like that. So that's pretty neat. Let's just make it 200 pixels so that it's not all the way over there. So this is our very, very primitive app right here. We just have a navigation link up here, and that's what we have so far. Step 13. Now we're going to set up Bootstrap for our app, which will make styling our app a lot easier, as well as make it responsive, which means it will work at basically any size. To do this, let's first install two dependencies. So let's close our server. First, we're going to install npm-is, capital S, Bootstrap SASS, which is a special SASS version of Bootstrap, and jQuery, which Bootstrap needs. I spelled Bootstrap wrong. So Bootstrap. Let's do that. This shouldn't take too long to install. Next, let's install some dev dependencies that we're going to need. So let's do npm-i or npm-i-d. We're going to need Bootstrap loader. We're going to need URL loader, which Bootstrap loader is going to be using to load some font files for Bootstrap. File loader, which is a dependency that URL loader needs. We also need resolve URL loader, which is just a dependency that we need. I don't really know what it does. And we need imports loader, which we also need as well. So let's install those. And I'm going to skip ahead while these download. Next, let's update webpack.config.js to use Bootstrap SASS and be able to load Bootstrap for our files. So let's go here. So first, we need to put in Bootstrap SASS here, or Bootstrap loader. And next, let's be able to load our Bootstrap font files with just this here. And I'm not sure exactly, well, this is just stuff that I found online, so from documentation. So don't worry too much about the exactly what's going on here. These are just font extensions that we want Bootstrap to be able to, or that we want Webpack to be able to recognize. And this syntax I just found from documentation, so it's not like I've memorized this or anything. I'm copying this from another screen, so I'm not that smart to be able to remember all of this stuff. And then let's have another loader to load our Bootstrap with jQuery. So this is needed to make sure that Bootstrap can use jQuery, which it needs, Bootstrap SASS. And again, this I'm just copying from another screen, so don't worry about needing to memorize this stuff. And then imports, so that's the imports loader that we installed, which will import jQuery. All right, now let's update our HTML files to use some Bootstrap classes. So let's just put in a class equals container here, and we don't need to style that because that's part of Bootstrap that will style things automatically. And now let's test things out by running our Webpack dev server. And I'm just going to do npm run dev here. We'll see what happens. Oh, and it turns out we have two mistakes here. We need to put a question mark here so that it will include WAF files without the two, as well as JavaScripts here. So let's rerun our server now. And it's going to compile. Now let's reload our browser here. And now we should see the Bootstrap formatting here. And one thing that I did before I did this was I took out from our master.scss, we had a margin right 200 pixels here. I actually took that out because Bootstrap makes the styling work better. And so you'll see that live reload automatically, which is really neat. So that is how we set up Bootstrap for our app. Step 14. It is now time to finally build our to-do app. I know that it took a long time to get here, but we are working on building our app the right way and making it scalable and maintainable instead of just hacking together some code that won't really make a good app in the future. And also in the future, you can just use my repository to jumpstart apps that you build. We're working on learning right now, not saving as much time as we can. There are starters out there like my repository that you can use to skip all of this basic setup. So first, let's configure our config to include a controller. So let's import something called, let's just make it called todos controller. And we're going to create a file called todos/todos. And let's define this controller here. The reason why we can't use require here is because Webpack compiles this into a string, whereas here this needs to be a function and not a string. And so now let's create our todos controller, todos file, so todos.js. So we're not going to do anything with our controller for now besides just export a function. And we'll do more with this a little bit later, but we'll just do this for now. For now, let's update our HTML to show a little bit more information. So it's actually going to have the skeleton of our app. So first, let's create our create task button up here. And this one's just going to have an input. And we are using Bootstrap formatting here. So we're going to have form control. And we're going to give it a special class name that we can style as well. So we'll just call it todos. And I'm using something like BEM syntax here. You can create whatever class names you want. I like it because it keeps things organized. and we'll have a placeholder here. And we'll just say, what do I need to do? And then that will be the input. Let's just close that here. That's not necessary, but then below it, let's have a button. And the class will be another Bootstrap thing. And it'll be success, which will make it green basically. And we'll create a class for this as well. Create button. And then the button will say create task. Just really quickly, let's load this to see what that looks like. Oh, I forgot a comma. All right. Here we go. Let's reload this. Oh, and these should actually be BTNs. So make these BTN. And then let's refresh this. And then let's just add some CSS styling to make it look a little bit nicer. So let's go back to our CSS master.css file here. And let's actually do something else to show you how to make things more scalable. We're going to create a file here called todos.scss, and we are going to import that into our master so then we can have several different CSS files or SCSS files and keep it modular and not have them all be in the same file. So we're going to import todos.scss, and then in our todos.scss, let's now style those two things that we did over there. So let's do todos. And again, this is one really cool thing about preprocessors is that you can nest your styles. And so this and button just means that it's going to be connected. So if I do this and create input, that would be the same thing as doing .todos create input. It's just kind of cleaner syntax so that I can keep it all under the todos instead of repeating the todos over and over. And so we're going to make this, we're going to give this a margin 0 auto. 0 auto is a trick to center blocks. So that's what I'm doing. 5 pixels is going to be margin 5 pixels on the bottom. And the width, let's just make it 300 pixels. And then let's style the create button. As you can see, this just kind of keeps our code organized. And I just love the fact that we can nest styles here. Otherwise, we would have to create separate lines for all of these, and it's kind of annoying. And we're going to do display block here to make it take up the whole. And let's have a margin bottom here. So 0 auto and 20 pixels on the bottom. You can see the live reloading showing up right there, which is cool. Let's go back to our todos.html and let's add some more to this. And let's take away this space here. I don't know where that came from. And let's start creating our table now. So let's just do table class. Again, just simple Bootstrap formatting to make it look nice really easily. Table stripe. And let's just kind of put in some dummy data just to kind of show you to kind of see what the table looks like. So we'll do a tr here, close that, and then we'll do table header. So tr stands for table row, so we'll just create our headers here. First one will be completed. Second one will be, and we can also just do that with a Sublime, task. And then down here we can do th actions. Let's just see what that looks like here. Refresh that. So now we have our table headers there. Now let's throw in another table row. Let's just put in some dummy data here. So tr, and then let's just do td now. So th stands for table header, and then td just stands for a regular column or whatever. We'll just say yes, and then wash dishes. Again, we'll replace this. Next, actions. Let's just do, I don't know, edit, delete. We're going to change it. We're just using dummy data right now just to show you what the table looks like. We will replace this with some Angular code in a little bit. So, all right, so you see we have 2 rows here on the table striped. This is some nice styling here. All right, next what we want to do is we're going to actually replace this with some Angular code. So instead of creating each row individually, we're going to use an Angular directive called ng repeat. And so let's do tr, so table row, ng repeat equals to-do in to-dos. And I'll explain this in a little bit. And then we'll do tr right here. So the to-do and to-dos here basically means that we're going to have a collection called to-dos in our controller here. So then ng repeat means that we're going to iterate through the to-dos, and each item in the to-dos is going to be represented by the keyword or the variable to-do. And really quickly, I shouldn't have deleted this header part right here, so let's put that back in. I just copy pasted that from another screen. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually define our to-dos variable here, or our collection, which is going to be an array. And the way that we connect our HTML with our controller here is with something that in Angular called scope. And the place where we get this scope from is from the config here. Remember, we are defining our to-dos controller here. And so that is where the scope variable comes from, or the scope word comes from. So what we can do is scope.todos. And just by doing this, this is Angular's magical two-way binding. Whatever we define here will be this to-dos in here in the HTML as well. So let's just define two tasks that we can have here. So let's just do dishes, and let's have something called is completed here, and this one will be false. And let's do the same thing down here. Let's have a task. Task will be to walk the dog, and is completed will make this one true. And now in our HTML, what we can do is we can actually define our rows. And so let's just have this one show a checkbox. So it'll be input type equals checkbox, and let's just give it class, and just so we can do a little bit of styling, and I'll show you what we want to do in a little bit. We'll just call it to-dos checkbox, and we'll close this here, and let's create another row. This one, let's just do span class name, or class equals to-dos task, and I'll show you why we want to do this in a little bit. It'll make things look a little bit nicer. And then the way that we kind of do code inside of our HTML is with double brackets. So whenever we have double brackets, we can include variables in them or do JavaScript code. So we can have this to-do in here. So let's just put in here to-do.task, which is what we called the name of the task. Task is do dishes here. And then for the third one here, let's just have some action buttons here. So let's have two buttons. And the first button will be class equals, I can't type, btn info, and it's going to say edit. And the second button, let's have it be class btn. This is just going to make it red, and then this one will say delete. So now let's refresh our browser and see what that looks like here. You can see that we have two rows here, even though we just wrote one row of code here. So this is one way that Angular helps you save a lot of code and how powerful the directives can be. We have checkboxes here which don't do anything yet. So our next task is going to be to hook it up so that when we click these checkboxes, we put strike-throughs through the tasks here. Notice how these lines are a little bit above the middle. They don't look very nice. So let's just do something really quickly to make that look a little bit nicer. So let's just go to our todos.scss and let's add some styling to them. So checkbox, let's do position relative. Let's just do top. Let's see what that looks like. Top 3 pixels maybe. And then let's do, so yeah, it just moved down a little bit. Let's make it 4 pixels. And then let's do, instead of making the text go down a little, let's just make it a little bit bigger. So let's just do THTD. Let's just make all of the text a little bit bigger. Let's do font size 20 pixels. Save that. It'll make it look a little bit bigger and nicer. And actually we find out that we don't need this checkbox here because the font size makes it look nicer. So let's take that out of our HTML. And I've kind of done this before, so I kind of know what I don't need to do and what I need to do. So then let's also text align this center just so it's not all on the left side. So good. Now this looks a little bit nicer. And now let's hook up the checkbox functionality. To do this, let's first make it so that when we refresh the page, a task that is completed will automatically be checked. So we see is completed is true here. We want that to be checked upon refresh, which currently it is not. So let's go to our HTML, and to do that, we're going to add a ng checked here, which is another Angular directive which allows you to put a logic thing in here. So it's just going to be todo.isChecked. So basically, if todo.isChecked is true, then the checkbox will be checked. So let's refresh the browser. You can see that when we refresh it, oh, and that's because this should be is completed right here. So let's change that. Completed debugging. Let's refresh it. Yep, and now you can see it is checked upon reload, which is great. Next, we want the tasks to be strike-through'd, or I don't know if that's a phrase, when we click the checkbox. And so first thing we're going to do is let's add a function here. So ng click. So when we click the checkbox, we want to do something. And we could put JavaScript code here, just logic in here, but I don't like mixing too much JavaScript code into the HTML. That's one thing that's feels kind of dirty about Angular. I'm actually going to call a function. So we're going to call onCompletedClick. We're going to call it, and we're going to pass in to-dos. And I just like to define all of my functions in the same place, just to have it be more organized and cleaner. And so we're calling a function called onCompletedClick. And another cool thing about Angular is that we can define that just by using the scope here. So scope.onCompletedClick. So here we're defining the function that we are calling here. And what we're going to do is it's going to be a function. And this is ES6 shorthand syntax. So this is basically the parameter to do. When you only have one parameter, you don't need parentheses. Usually you need that if you want like another second parameter. But since it's just one parameter, you don't. And this is just kind of cleaner syntax. And the double equals also binds this keyword, but we won't worry about that here. So to do, and we're just going to swap the is completed. So to do dot is completed is going to be equal to the opposite of what it was. And so when we click the checkbox, the is completed is going to swap from true to false and from false to true, whichever one it currently is. And then in our class here, we are also going to include something else in our span here. And so let's put in another Angular directive here, which is going to be ng class again, which allows us to insert code into class to make it conditional based on conditions. And so our ng class is going to be, it's going to have an object in here, and it's going to add in a class if this condition is true. So let's have another class called todo's task. This is again BEM syntax. This is basically a state of the task. We'll call it completed here. This just kind of makes it more organized. I know it looks really ugly. That's one criticism of BEM, but it makes it more organized, and I think it's worth the ugliness for the organization that it gives us. And so we're going to add in this class if the to-do.isCompleted is true. So basically, if to-do.isCompleted is true, it's going to add in this class using the ng class directive. So now let's style in the task completed style here. So let's put in task, so to-do's task, and then we'll say and is completed, and that's going to have a text decoration of line through. And so let's test that out. I might be missing something, but it's just debugging. And the problem is because it shouldn't be is completed, it should be just completed, which is what we define the class as. So let's refresh this, and we'll see that this task, which is already checked, has the strike through it. Now let's try these things. Now when we check this, the strike throughs will appear. So that is really cool. And you see some of the powers of Angular directives here. We just added a little bit of code, and it just put in all of that logic for us. All right, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make this input box do something cool. You remember how at the beginning, when you typed in here, it automatically added another row here? There's going to be some logic to this. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly, so if you get lost, just rewind or watch it again until you get it. So in our to-dos here, we're going to connect our input box with another Angular directive called ngModel. And so let's put in at the end here ngModel, and we're going to just call this create task input. And so this again will bind create task input to both the HTML here as well as the controller here. What we're going to do here is we're going to use another Angular thing called watch. What this is going to do is it's going to watch the create task input ngModel on the DOM or on the HTML, and it's going to respond with we're going to respond with a callback. And this val here just represents whatever is inside of this input. So whatever we type in here will be represented by this val here. And let's actually use ES6 syntax here. So val, and then so what we're going to do now is I'm going to run through a lot of logic really quickly, so just try to follow along. First, we'll just say if there is a value, so if something exists in the box, we are going to push something to the to-dos. So remember this array up here? It's automatically bound to the HTML. So whenever that changes, it'll automatically be reflected in this ng repeat here. So we're going to push a new value to the to-dos, and let's just push in task is going to be the value, and then is completed is going to be false. And this will do something. It's not going to do everything we want it to do, because you'll see here, if I type here, A, it'll push it there. But every time I type in a new letter, it will push something else in there. And so we do not want that. And so what we're going to do here is when we have something in the input box, we want to stop pushing into that array up there. So let's just create a param up here. And I'm actually going to make this an object, and I'll explain a little why later on. I could just create a variable, but you'll find out why I'm using an object in a little bit. We'll do let params equals, and we'll just define a variable here, and let's just call it create has input. So this is just be, does the create have an input? And we'll start it off with false, because when we refresh the page, there's nothing in there. And so we'll say if val and no params dot create has input. So if there is a value in there and create has input is false, then we are going to push it in there. And then underneath here, we're going to set params dot create has input to true. So now it will only push into the to-dos array when there is only the first time, but you'll see it doesn't do it anymore after that. So we need to add some more logic now. Let's put in here, else if, so if there is a value in there and create has input is true, we're going to update the last value of the to-dos array to be the value so that the task will be updated. So let's just put in here, it's going to be scope.todos, and then it's going to be scope.todos.length -1. And this just represents the last item in this array. So we've pushed an item into this array up here, and we're going to modify the last item with length -1. And that's just going to be equal to the val, which is whatever is in that input box here. And we actually need to put .task here. So we're changing the task to be equal to whatever's in the text box. So let's refresh this. And now we will see that this works correctly. Whatever we type here, it will not add another row after that. But now here's another problem, is that if we delete all of this, it will still be there. So now we need to add code to delete that when there is nothing in there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add another conditional here. So we're going to say if there is no value in there and params.create has input. So if there's something in there, or if we've entered something in there and there is no longer any value in there, we're just going to remove that last item from the array. So we're just going to say scope.todos.pop. Pop just removes the last item from an array. And then we're going to reset the params. So params.create has input equals false. And let's put this into an else if here. This is just to make our app look nice and do something fancy. It's not absolutely necessary. So now you'll see that if we type, let's say another task, now when we delete this, it'll pop it off. And that's just some cool fancy magic that Angular can do really nicely. So that's that. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to make this create task button work so that whatever we type in here, when we click create task, it will actually save it to our to-dos array. But right now, if we erase this, it will disappear. So to do that, something really interesting about our code here, and this isn't really too normal, is that we're already keeping track of a variable or a scope called create task input, and it's actually already being pushed to our to-dos array here. So as we're typing, this actually exists in our to-dos array, which is what Angular is iterating over. The problem is that once we erase this box, it'll disappear. So actually all we need to do is we're going to first create a onClick function here, or onSubmit function. So we'll just do ng submit. And the difference between ng submit and doing an ng click down here is that ng submit will work for pressing enter up here instead of just clicking the create task. If we had just done an onClick here or ng click here, all that would work is clicking create task. But using ng submit, we could either click create task or we can press enter in our keyboard. So let's just do we'll call it create task. So again, we're just calling a function that we are now going to define in our controller. So let's put it down here. Let's say scope.create task equals, and we're just going to use ES6 syntax here. And just this empty parentheses means that there's no parameters here. And all we need to do here, since we've already written this code down here, is we just need to params.createHasInput. We're going to reset that to false, and then we are going to clear the create task input. So we're going to make it show nothing. So basically we're resetting the params up here so that when we erase the input, it won't disappear from the table. And we are going to empty the input box when we click create task, and it will just leave that inside of our array that we've already pushed it into. If we hadn't written this code, what we would do here instead, which is more standard, is we would grab the value. So we'd say something like scope.createTaskInput. We'll just do like scope.todos.push. Actually, I'll write it out here. We do something like scope.todos.push, scope.createTaskInput, and then we would empty it. So put this down here as well. But since we've written the code up there, we can avoid doing that. So all we need to do is this. This should be create task input, duh. All right, let's say go to the store, create task. It'll empty, it'll add it there. We can add other stuff. Wash the car. I can also press enter, and I can do blah, 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 enter. So we can either type and press enter, or we can click create task. So that is pretty cool, and we are finished with the create button there. All right, so now we're going to make the edit button work. And remember from the demo that when we click edit, this should turn into an input box that we can then update and then save here. So let's first hook up something to our edit box here. So let's add a click handler to the edit button. So we'll just say ng-click is going to be equal to, we'll just say on edit click, and we're going to call it. And let's pass in the to do here. And in our controller, let us define, let's put all of our click handlers together. So let's say scope.onEditClick equals to do, again, ES6 syntax. And we want to switch the state from not being edited to being edited. So let's add another variable here. Let's just say is editing, and we'll default that to false. By the way, Sublime is amazing. You can do multiple cursors by doing control or command click. So I could do that, and just type like that. There's so much that you can do. You can use command D, stuff like that, and just replace them all with true if you want. But that's so just something cool about Sublime. All right, so what we're going to do is when we click it, we're going to change to do.isEditing is going to be equal to true after we click that. So this actually won't do anything yet. If we click edit, nothing will happen. So now what we want to do is we want to change this to be an input box when isEditing is true. So first, to do that, we're going to do some more Angular directives here. And I actually think this is kind of dirty. I don't really like the way that I'm doing so much JavaScript inside of the HTML here, but it's just the way that Angular works. So here, the span, we're going to show the span. If it is not editing, we are going to show the span. And this looks kind of messy here. So let's just try to clean this up a little bit. I'm going to put these on multiple lines, I guess. So let's just do that. It's just so it's not all one line. All right, so that looks a little bit nicer. And then, so it'll show the span if it is not editing. And then basically, if it is editing, we will show an input box. So let's just do, again, we're going to use a form so that we can press the enter button. Let's just put it in. So ng-submit equals update task. And we will pass in the to do here. So let's close that right there. And inside of here, let's put an input box. And this will show up if the state is editing. So if isEditing is true, then this input box will show up. And let's add a Bootstrap class here called form control. And let's add another styling here that we're going to modify. So to-dos update input. And then the ng value is going to be, we're going to initialize it. So ng value is another Angular directive. And so this is just going to be what we initialize in the input box. And that's just going to be to-do.tasks. So we want the input box to show the task when it appears. And then we're going to set an ng model on this input as well. And so this is going to help us keep track of what we type in the input box. And we'll just say this is going to be the updated task, whatever new task we want to put in there. And so that is that. Let's test this out by going to here. Let's click on edit, and you'll see that it turns into an input box when we click edit, but nothing else happens after that, so we're not quite done. Before we do anything else, let's kind of do a little bit more styling here. And so we're going to go to our CSS, and we're going to just kind of minimize this is really wide right here. Let's make that a little bit smaller. So let's do and update input, and let's do, let's put it, make sure it's in the middle first, and then let's make it the width the same as the box up there so that they're the same width. And you'll see that it auto live reloaded, which is awesome. That is something so cool about Webpack, and you can do it with Grunt and Gulp as well, but yeah, live reloading is awesome. So now what we want to do is we want to switch out the buttons as well, so that when we click edit, the buttons change also. So again, we're just going to use the ng-if here. So these are going to show up if we are in the not editing state. So I'm using my multiple cursors here. So let's do ng-if to do dot is editing, and we need to make it not, when it's not editing, we'll show those. And then when it is editing, we will show other buttons. Let me just copy these. So, and we'll take away the exclamation points here. So if it is editing, we will show the save and cancel buttons. So this will be save. This will be cancel. And let's change the colors of these. Save will be blue, which is going to be primary. This one will be default, which will just be kind of a gray color. And let's take away this ng click here for now, and we'll hook those up in a little bit. So let's test that out. So now when we click edit, the buttons will change also, and this will change as well, and that will change as well. But these buttons currently don't do anything. So let's set up our cancel button, since that should be pretty easy. Let's make this ng click equals, we'll make this on cancel click, and we don't need to pass anything in because actually we do. Let's pass in the to do because we need to reverse the is editing state. And so let's put in scope dot on cancel click equals to do, and we're just gonna swap the editing state back to false. Let's test that out. So refresh the browser. You'll notice nothing's persisting right now. If I create a task and then refresh the browser, it's going to disappear. That will change once we hook up our app to MongoDB, so we'll have an actual database. So we click edit, it'll put the input box, we click cancel, and that is really lame because I should have put this not in the closing tag, but in the actual tag up here. So that is why it didn't work. So let's try that again, refresh. If I click edit, the input box will show up. If I click cancel, it will revert back to this. And so we can do that with both of them as well. And so that works now. So now what we need to do is we need to get the save button to work. So to hook up the save handler, we're going to create a handler for save. And this time I'll make sure to put it in the opening tag here. It's going to be ng click. And let's just call this update task, because that's what we're doing. And we're going to pass in here to do. And then in our controller, let's create our update task function here. So let's just create it down here. Scope.update task is going to be equal to do. And here's what we're going to do inside of this. And let me put a semicolon up here. That reminds me, I think I'm missing a semicolon in here. I'm just going to randomly, I just remember random things. So here, what we're going to do is just a few different things here. We're going to set the to-do.task. We're going to update the task to be equal to the to-do.updated task. And remember, where this comes from is going to be right here. So remember here we set the ng model to be the updated task, and this actually should be to-do.updated task. So as we type, it's going to be creating a new property in the to-do called updated task. And so when we click save, we are going to set the task to be the updated task, or whatever is the updated task in this input box right here. And then next thing we just need to do is we just need to set the is editing to false, because once we click save, we are done editing. And we don't need to do anything to the updated task. This just means that whenever we click edit again, the updated task will already be in the input box, so we don't need to empty it or anything. And so let's try that out really quickly. So let's refresh this. If we click edit here, Let's do do dishes tomorrow. Click save. It will save our task as our updated task, and if we click edit again, it will have that there. Now here's a problem. Let me refresh the browser to show you. If I click edit and then cancel and then edit and then save, you'll notice that the do dishes is gone. And the reason why is because this updated task here is initialized to nothing. At first it doesn't exist at all. So when I click edit, the updated task here is actually set to nothing right now because we haven't typed in here yet. It only gets set when we start typing in the box here. So to fix this, what we need to do is that when we first click edit, we're going to set, I put that in for debugging earlier. When we click edit, we are going to set the to-do.updated task to be equal to the to-do.task. That way we're initializing the value rather than initializing to be null. And so we'll do edit, try it again, cancel, edit, save, and now it will stay there. So we have fixed that bug. You don't really discover these things until you play with the app and realize that there was bugs in it. So this is a good learning experience. All right, so next we're going to figure out how to hook up our delete button here, which currently doesn't do anything. We've gotten our create and our edit, which is really cool. So let's go to our todos.html, and let's go to our cancel button here, and let's add another ng click here. Let's just do ng click here, and we'll call it remove. Well, we have delete up there, so let's say this is delete task, and we will pass in the to do. We're actually going to name this to do. Yeah, we'll pass in the to do, and this looks kind of. There's a lot going on up here. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. Put them on new lines. It just helps to make code look a little bit cleaner instead of having these ridiculously long lines with tons of attributes in them. So let's do that. This also helps make our code more maintainable, which is good for other people who walk in and don't want to look at vomited code on the page. This is just cleanup. Very important for working on a team if you want people to not hate the code that you write. Oh, that should actually go. So I caught that while cleaning up code. That should go up there and not down there. So this just makes our code look nicer. And let's do that. We're just doing all sorts of stuff here. Clean up code, debugging, adding new functionality. It's all part of the life of a developer. So here we go. I like doing this sort of stuff. It just makes me feel like my code is so much cleaner. So now, doesn't that look so much cleaner? We don't have this long garbage line that makes us want to throw up anymore. Let's do that up here as well. And let's actually put this on a new line as well. So this is kind of tedious, but it is totally worth it in my opinion. All right, so our code looks better now. And now let's define our delete task. And you can kind of see that it's nicely organized. Each of these has 3, an ngIf, a class, and an ngClick. Couldn't really see that as clearly before. So now let's define our remove task or delete task thing. So scope.delete task. And we're actually going to call this to do to delete here. And I'll explain why a little later, because we're going to actually have a to do variable inside of here. And one thing here, so for our delete task, what we want to do is we want to iterate through our to-dos array and remove the to-do that we clicked on. So we want to somehow match the to-do that we're passing in here to the proper to-do in here and remove that from the array. And we could do that with vanilla JavaScript, but let's pull in another dependency that is very, very useful that you should definitely learn to use and learn to use often. And that dependency is called Lodash. And Lodash is basically it's basically an improved version of underscore. There's more functionality in Lodash. And underscore and Lodash are basically libraries that allow you to manipulate JavaScript more effectively and efficiently. They have things that kind of help you do things with less code. So now we have Lodash in here. What we need to do is we need to import the Lodash in here. So let's do import underscore or Lodash from Lodash here. And what we're going to use here is we're going to use something called underscore dash underscore dot remove. Underscore or Lodash has documentation here, and it just kind of explains all the different methods that you can use, just things that make your life a lot easier instead of you having to write out all of these things yourself. We're going to use remove, which is designed to remove an element from an array based on something that matches. What we're going to do is, first thing here is going to be the array that we want to iterate through, scope.todos. And for each of the to-dos, so this is going to be, for each item we're going to iterate, we're going to create a variable called to-do, and that's going to represent each item that we iterate over. And that's why we call this to-do to delete up here instead of to-do, because we don't want to duplicate our variable names there. We actually don't need this these brackets here because we're just going to do an implicit return. So this just makes our code a little bit cleaner. So we're just going to return if to-do.task matches to-do to delete.task. So if the tasks match up with each other, we're going to remove that from the array. And once we remove that, it should automatically remove that from our HTML and our DOM. So let's go back here, refresh here. Oh, I forgot to run our dev server again. So let's do npm run dev and wait for that to bundle. And then let's refresh our browser right here. And let's click delete here. And you can see that our to-dos are deleted. And we can add in more stuff. And we can delete them. And we can edit them. So we have all of our CRUD functionality, which is really cool. And so let's just play around with this a little bit to make sure things work fine. Enter, delete, edit, cancel, edit, save. Everything seems to be working fine. And this is awesome. So we are finished with our front-end app. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to refactor our code a little bit to use Angular factories, which is a way to organize our app even further and to make our app even more scalable and maintainable, which is really important if we want to scale our app to be bigger and bigger. We are learning a lot of best principles here. This isn't about just getting the app finished. We're working on building an app that will be lasting and that will be a really good app. All right, so now let's dig into Angular factories. And I think I'm done with the step 1, step 2 stuff because I've kind of lost track after all this. Angular factories are in the category of Angular services, which are basically ways to make our code more organized, scalable, and maintainable. They allow us to put all of the relevant functions and stuff into one file together so that it's all together in one place. You'll notice we have a lot of stuff in here, a lot of stuff going on in our controller. Factories allow us to clean up this code and to put everything related to to-dos inside of a factory. So to make a factory, or to get set up, let's first create a folder called factories. And so all of our factories will go in here. We're only going to make one, but if we had more, we would put them all in here. Or this is just one way to organize it. Let's just call this the to-dos factory .js. And inside of our to-dos factory, let's just really quickly define, we'll just say to-do factory. And this is actually going to be an Angular module. So let's import in Angular again. Import Angular from Angular. And this is going to be angular.module. And we're going to name this app.todo factory. There's several different ways. I just like doing it this way. This is the way that I learned how to do it. And it's going to be a module that's going to be a factory as well. So this module is basically just a factory, and we're going to name it to-do factory. So that's basically the name. And let's just do this for now. ES6 syntax. We will put in some stuff into those parameters in a little bit, but we don't need anything right now. And something that we can do with factories is we can do something like function. So we have something called create task. So we can do create task. And so we can define that here. And then for factories at the bottom, the way that they work is we're just going to return stuff out of the factory. So we'll just say something called create task is going to be create task. But since we have ES6 syntax, there's something called shorthand. So if we just do create task here, it'll automatically be something like :create task. We don't actually need this part here because that's ES6 syntax. And so now if we go to our config, we can do something like, let's import in to-dos factory, or to-do factory, I guess, from to-dos / from factories. And let's actually name it to-do factory since that's what we're calling it there. To-do to-do factory, just so we're consistent there. And we're going to import this into our config. So we're going to do comma here. And then we'll just do to-do factory dot name. So that's the syntax there. And then in our to-dos now, we can import in to-do factory here. So let's put in to-do factory. And now let's just really quickly, just to make sure that it's working, let's just console log to-do factory. And let's just see if we have our create task here. Let's just put something random in here. Let's just do return true or something like that. And let's just refresh our browser here. And something is wrong. And that is because I forgot to put a comma here. So let's refresh our browser again. And we also need to export the factory from this file. So we need to do something like export default to do factory. Let's try that again. Let's see. All right, so now we see the console log down here. We see the create task function, so we know that our factory is set up properly. And it's always nice to do things in bite-sized chunks so that you can debug along the way instead of writing a whole bunch of code and then not knowing where it's breaking down. So now let's define our create task. Let's dual screen this. And so Sublime has split screen so that we can see these two files side by side. So first thing we want to do is we want to create our create task here. And so you'll notice create task is down here. If we were really intense, we would put all of these functions into our factory, but we're going to leave the onclicks here because they're pretty simple and short. But if we wanted to really do things well, we would put them in here probably. We're just going to put our CRUD stuff and some of the stuff that might get more complex later on into our factory. And so you'll notice that our create task here has two variables that are inside of this file here. There's params, which is up here, as well as scope, which is in this file as well. So we actually need to pass these into our create task here. So we're going to have two variables here. We're going to have scope, and we're going to have params. And now here's the reason why we made our params an object up here. Objects that are in arrays are passed by reference, whereas normal variables are passed by copy. And so we don't want to pass a copy of create has input into the create task function here, because we want our function here to mutate or to update this object here. If we just pass in the variable, it would just make a copy of the variable, and this wouldn't change at all. So by passing in the object, we're actually going to be able to change the object inside of our to-do factory. And so we do want to pass in the stuff into our function here. But first, let's just put in this code up here. So it's going to do the exact same thing. But and then for our create task here, it's going to be to-do factory dot create task, which is what we are returning down here. And so we want to always pass in scope and params into create task. So the way that we can do that is, one way to do that is to do create task. So this is the method. We could do .bind this, and then we could do scope param. So that's one way to do it. That way we're binding scope and params to this method with this context. Now we don't actually use this, so that's not actually necessary. So we could use bind, but we're going to be kind of cool here and use a Lodash method where we don't actually need this, just to make it slightly cleaner and make us feel a lot cooler. So what we can do is use a Lodash method called partial, which not many people use, but it's pretty neat. It just does the same thing as bind, except you don't need this if you're not using it. So we're just gonna bind scope and params there. And so let's test it out to make sure that our create task still works. So let's put wash the car, enter, and it is saved, and it seems to be working fine. So our factory is working. Let's just do one more. Cut my hair, enter, and so that is working properly. And now let's write our update task method here. So let's just do the same thing, function update task. So update task is just going to have the to-do variable, so that's all we need in there. So let's just have to-do there, and let's return update task down here, and let's put in this same stuff into that function over there. And then let's do the same thing where we do partial to do factory dot update task, and then we're going to bind to do there. We don't actually need to put the to do there. Basically, whatever is passed into update task is automatically going to be put into the parameters here. It's going to automatically put it to the end of the parameters. And so if we bound something else here, let's say we put scope in here, then the first parameter here would be scope, and the second one will be whatever we passed into here. And if we passed in more, it would be, if we had another parameter, it would be right here. So that's how that works. So let's not pass anything into the first parameter there and leave it to be the to-dos, and let's refresh. And now let's try to update, do dishes now, and then let's press enter, save it. And so our update task is now working properly, so that is really cool. And then now let's do our delete task. So let's do function delete task. And this is just going to have, so you see that delete task has scope and the parameter. So we're going to have scope, and then to do to delete, we'll leave that the same. And let's copy in this stuff right here. And we need to define Lodash up here since we are using it now. So let's import in Lodash, import underscore from Lodash. And so let's put in the delete task right here. And let's define this down here. Let's just make this partial. It's going to be to do factory dot delete task. Pass in scope for our first argument there. So let's try that again. Refresh the browser. Now when we click delete, it works and everything seems to be working fine. We can edit and all that. And now all of our functions are in the factory here. And let's just move this in there also. Anytime we have such a big block of code that relates to to-dos, it's just good to put that in there as well. So we'll say function. Let's call this watch create task input. And you'll see that we have several different variables in here. We have params, scope, as well as the value here. So let's put that in. And we want to make the val the last parameter here because we want to bind the scope and the params. So let's just say params, scope, and then whatever we pass into the function will be the last argument here. And so that'll be val. And now let's just copy this stuff in there. If else. And let's, to kind of make this a little bit cleaner, let's cache create has input up here. So create has input is going to be equal to params dot create has input. This is just to make our code a little bit cleaner so we don't have this over and over. All right, and then one more, I think. All right, so create has input. And instead of this down here now, let's make it something, let's make it use the factory code. So it's going to be dot partial to do factory dot watch create task input. And we're going to pass in order params, then scope, params, and then scope. And we do need to return this down here as well. So let's do watch create task input. And let's just kind of put these all together since they're just kind of one-liners now. And just kind of look how clean that is. Now we have our create task, update task, delete task, and watch. And they just, you can kind of see exactly what they're doing. And we have all of these functions here lined up side by side. And so this is just really organized and neat. Oh, and the problem we have here is the exact reason why we made params an object instead of just a variable. Because here, create has input is just a variable. And so this is passed by copy. So this is a copy of create has input. So doing these lines down here, this actually does not change this object right here because this is a copy of create has input. So what we need to do is we actually need to mutate params dot create has input. So let's try that again. Let's refresh our browser and things should work now. Let's do cut my hair, enter, and it looks like everything is working right now. So that is awesome. All right, so now we have refactored our code to use factories. Again, as a personal exercise, you might want to try to move these over to your factory as well. And really quickly, before we move on, I'm just going to show you a really cool feature of ES6. There's something called destructuring. So you notice here we have to do factory dot, to do factory dot. It looks kind of ugly like that. We can actually do something called destructuring. So we can do create task update task, delete task. And this is just a really cool and clean feature of ES6, is going to be equal to to-do factory. So what it's going to do is just going to take to-do factory, and whatever is in there, it's just going to create variables out of the methods or the keys inside of to-do factory. So now we can get rid of all of these, since now create task, update task, delete task, and watch are defined up here. So let's just delete these. And just to make sure, let's refresh our browser to make sure things are still working. And type in wash the car, enter, edit. Today, everything is still working. So that is ES6 destructuring. It is really cool, and I would recommend that you use it. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to set up MongoDB for our app. So what we can do is we can go to mongodb.org and then click on download MongoDB and just follow the instructions here for your operating system. Mine is OS X. And after you install it, make sure you know which folder you download MongoDB to. After you install it, you need to create 2 folders at the root of your computer. And so let me just kind of show you what that looks like. So here we have my computer here. For Macs, you're going to go into Macintosh HD or whatever your root folder is called. For Windows, you'll go into your C drive. You're going to create a folder called data. And then inside of data, you're going to create a folder called DB. And you don't actually need anything in those folders. They just need to be empty. So create those folders. And then to run MongoDB, you're going to navigate to the folder that you installed MongoDB into. For me, it is going to be cd user, cd local, cd bin. And you'll see here that I have a bunch of Mongo stuff here. And the one that we're interested in right now is going to be this MongoD here. And so to run MongoDB, you just type in MongoD. And if you are on a Mac, you might get a permissions error. If you get a permissions issue with running MongoD, you can just type this into your terminal. Oh, not that. And so this is something that I found online that gives you permission to run MongoD for your data/DB folders. So I think it's because it's at the root of your computer, so you need special permissions sometimes. So just type that in, press enter, and then you can run MongoD. And once you have it running, we're just going to leave MongoDB on as we continue working on our app. All right, so next what we're going to do is we're going to install some dependencies that we're going to use to allow our app to communicate with MongoDB. So the first thing we're going to install is called Mongoose, which is going to be the way that we're going to interact with MongoDB. Mongoose is a really good method for doing that. And one thing that Mongoose depends on is Kerberos. We're not actually using that directly, but it's a dependency of Mongoose. And then we're also going to install Body Parser, which will allow us to read the data that our front end sends to our server. So I'm going to skip ahead as these download. Okay, so these have finished downloading. What we're going to do next is we're going to go into our Sublime here, and let's create a new folder here called Server, which is where we're going to put all of our code that kind of makes our server a little bit more organized and scalable. And so that way we don't need to put all of our code inside of our server here. We can actually make it scalable by separating out the different parts to this server folder here. So let's first create a folder called DB, and this is where we're going to include the code for our MongoDB database. And we'll create a file called db.js. And inside of this file, let's set up Mongoose. To do that, we're going to do first require the Mongoose dependency. And we're not using ES6 on our backend. We could set it up. It's a little bit different than for the front end, but we're just going to use regular node syntax here, and it's just good to know how to do that as well. So the way that we set up MongoDB is we do mongoose.connect mongodb ://localhost, and this is going to be our database name. It's going to be to-dos, and so Mongoose will automatically create the to-dos database since we don't have it existing yet. And what we're going to do now is we are going to define a schema for our to-dos, and the way that we do that is mongoose.model. The name of our schema is going to be to-do, and it's going to be take this form right here. So we have a task. Remember, this is the same thing that we have in our to-dos here. So this same structure. We have a task, which is going to be a string. We have is completed, which is going to be Boolean. And then we have is editing, which is Boolean. So this is just the shape of our to-dos item. And what we're going to do down here is we are going to export this to-do. And this is the syntax for doing that in Node. And you can see here that we're just exporting the to-do as a property of exports. If we wanted to create more schemas, we could create another schema down here. So we could do var another schema, and then we can export that as another one. So we can have as many schemas as we want in here. So another schema or something like that. We're just going to have one for our app, but this just kind of shows you how we could scale out our app to include more and more schemas. All right, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a route folder for our server. This will allow us to create different kinds of routes for our server. And so in our server.js file here, let's require that file first. I know we haven't put anything in it yet, but let's just define it first. var routes equals require server/routes. And then down here, we're just going to pass our app into routes here. So routes is going to be a function. So inside of routes here, let's define that out. And this is going to just be, we'll just module.export. So we want to be able to import that from our server. And this is just going to be a function. And let's just call it routes. And it's going to take the parameter app. And the syntax for express is we're going to just do app.use to-dos. So basically everything that goes through the route to-dos, so anything that has /to-dos at the end here, or anything after that, we are going to send to this controller or this file right here. And so let's require this file here. I know we haven't made it yet, but we will make it right after this. var to-dos routes, to-dos routes is equal to require server/to-dos/routes. And next, let's create that file and folder. So let's create a new folder called to-dos, and then create a file in here called routes.js. And what we're going to put in here is, let's just define some things that we're going to be needing in this file. We won't use them all right away, but let's just have them at the top. Equals require mongoose, and then var to-do. This is the schema that we just defined inside of our DB file. Server/db/db, and then .to-do. And then we're going to include express is equal to require express, and then var router is equal to express.router. And then at the bottom, we want to make sure that we export our router here. So we're going to export router. And right now, let's just define one route. Let's just do router.get. So when we go to to-dos with nothing after it, let's just respond with something really simple, just to test it out first. And so when we go to /to-dos, let's just respond.send. So we'll just do hello from /to-dos. And let's test that out by rerunning our server here and just make sure we don't have any syntax errors. So npm run dev. It's building, and it has been built. So let's first just refresh our root here just to make sure that things are working right. So that's loading right. And now let's put /to-dos here. And we see here, this is what we're sending from our server. So our routes are set up correctly. And let's just keep on going now. So we're actually going to skip this get for now because we don't have any to-dos to get from our database yet. So let's first set up our code to post or to save a to-do to our database. So let's do router.post. And post is what we use to basically send data to save to something. And so let's put in here function request respond. And inside of our post, let's create a new to-do. So remember, this is the schema that we defined. So we're going to create a new item for our database. And we're going to, the request.body, so the request is basically what the client is going to be sending to our server. Request.body is going to be what we read from the data that's being sent. And to use request.body, we need to use this thing that we installed earlier called body parser. And so just up here, let's just do something called app.use body parser.json. And we need to include that up here as well. So let's just put in var body parser equals require body parser. And so that will allow us to read our data from our front end. And once we've created this new to-do here, we're basically going to want to save it to our database. And the syntax for doing that with Mongoose is to-do.save. The function, it's going to take error here. And basically, let's just say this is just error handling. If there's an error, we're just going to, we'll just console log the error. So pretty simple there. And so now let's just test this out by going to our terminal, and let's just run npm run dev again and watch it build. And then let's refresh our browser here. And let's just try to create a task. Again, we haven't hooked anything else up, so it shouldn't really work all that well. So wash the car. Let's click create task. And you'll see the success logged here. And if we go to our terminal, you'll see the saved here. So we have now saved an item to our MongoDB. And one way we can test it out is we can actually go to our Mongo thing again. So go back to whatever user cd local cd bin. And so this time, instead of doing MongoD, we can type Mongo to go to our Mongo shell, whatever this is called. And so now we can kind of explore what's going on in MongoDB. So let's do show databases. We can say, so we see our to-dos database down here. So we can say use to-dos. Then we can say show collections. And so we have our to-dos collection here. So we can do db.todos.find. And now we can see the item that we added in. So it has successfully been saved to our database. So that is great. Now let's go back to our Sublime here. And we can actually hook up our get tasks now. And so now when we do router.get, we want to grab all of the to-dos from the database and then display them on our front end. So to do that, we're going to do to-do.find. Find is going to get all of the results in our database for this schema that we've defined here. And it's going to have two parameters here, error and results. And again, if there's an error, let's console log that. If error, we are going to console log the error. And then if there's no error, we're going to respond.send. And let's just send an object to-dos results. So we're going to send the results down along with the key to-dos. And so now for our front end, let's hook that up. So for our front end now, we want an additional method up here called get tasks, which will fetch all of the tasks from our database. So let's create a function here called get tasks. And it's going to take the scope in because we're going to call this from our controller, but we want all of our HTTP stuff inside of this factory just to keep things clean. So we're going to do http.get, and we're going to get to-dos. Remember, that's the route that we set in our server. And again, there's no callback. I'm really used to doing that. Success, after we fetch it, it's going to send the response down to us. And so the actual items in our database is actually going to be response.todos because that's the to-dos that we set here. So the to-dos is going to be the results. And so let's go here. And we want to set the scope.todos to be equal to the response that we get from our server. And so now let's hook up our controller here to do that. So now we're no longer going to be using this mock data, which is going to be old. And so at the way beginning of our app, let's just do something called to-do factory dot get tasks, and we're going to pass in the scope, and the factory will do everything else. So let's test that out to see if it works. If it works right, we should see this item that we just added show up in our browser. So let's do npm run dev and then refresh our browser to see if it's working right. Refresh. Oh, and we forgot to export it at the bottom here. So we're creating a new method. Let's do get tasks down here. And let's try that again. I don't think we need to refresh our browser for that. Or refresh it. Yeah. So yeah, we don't need to refresh our server or anything because that was just client-side code. And you can see here that we have washed the car here, even though we never typed it in, because it is getting pulled from our database. But if we try to add another task, let's say clean the house, and we do create task, it's actually not going to be there because we're missing some code for that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fix that problem. So to solve that problem, what we are going to do is first, let's just kind of clean up this code a little bit. Let's take away this save, and let's just respond.send to-do saved. This isn't really that important. And then let's go to our to-do factory here. And now you see we have the success response here. And basically all we need to do is after we save it, we want to get tasks. And we're going to pass in the scope. So we're going to re-get all of the items in our database, and then we're going to replace the scope.todos with the response from the database. So let's test that out. Again, we don't need to refresh our server or anything. So you see that this is loaded, and let's try wash the floor, create task, and you'll see that it is staying here. Now I can add another one now. Let's say clean the car, and those will all be saved. But these buttons don't really work yet because they don't really hook up to our database, so if I refresh it, they'll still be there. So the next thing we want to do is we want to hook up the edit functionality and hook that up to our database as well. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our Sublime, go to our to-dos routes, and we are going to add a new route here, and it's going to be .put, and .put is basically the convention to update an existing item in a database. And we're going to add a parameter there called ID, which we are also going to send down from our client side. And I'll explain how we're going to use that right now. So the way that Express grabs that ID is we can do var ID equals request.params.id. And this is basically going to be equal to the ID that we send down in the URL from the client side. And then to update it, we're just going to do to-do.update. And we're going to, so if you remember from our terminal here, when we output the to-do item, Mongoose attached the _ID property to the item, which we're going to be using to match the item that we're sending down with the item in the database. And so we want to find a match for the ID. So the item that we're sending down from the client will have an ID. We want to find the item in the database that matches that ID and then update that item in the database. And the way that we do that is Mongoose has a special syntax, mongoose.types.objectID. And basically that's going to find the object in the database that matches with the item that we want to update. And what we want to do here is we want to set the new task to be equal to the task that we send down from the client side. And so that's what that looks like there. And let's just have a callback function here. And if there's an error, we will respond, or we will console log the error once again. And we're just going to respond.send to do updated. We're not really going to do too much with that. And let's put a semicolon there. Now for our front end, let's do that. Let's go back to our to-do factory up here. And let's modify our update task. Let's comment this out since that's going to be old. And then in our update task, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do http.put. And we're going to do, let's do some string interpolation here. So with, well, first I'll show you how we would do it with normal JavaScript. We would do something like /todos plus todo.id. But it's kind of dirty having all these plus signs, especially if we have a lot of variables. So the way that ES6 makes that cleaner is we can actually use this tilde at the top left corner of our keyboard. And what we can do is we can do /todos, and then we can put variables inside of this $ bracket thing here. So we can just say todo.id, and that's just a cleaner way to create a string with variables in it. And we're going to send down the task is going to be the todo.updated task. So same thing that we had down here. And then .success, we're going to do the same thing that we did up above. Is we're going to have the response, and what we're going to do is we're just going to say get tasks. That way it'll refresh our screen. And then we also want to set todo.isEditing to false. So let's try that. Again, I don't think we need to refresh this. Let's just refresh our browser. And let's edit this, wash the car today. Let's save it. And it looks like scope is not defined. So let's actually pass in the scope here. So let's add in a scope here. And then back in our todos.js, let's pass in the scope. And so that is going to be in the update task. So we're just going to bind scope in there as well. So let's try that again. Refresh the browser, edit, wash the car today, save. And since we updated our server, we actually need to refresh our server here. And now let's try it again. Refresh our browser, try to edit a task, wash the car today, let's save it, and then let's refresh our browser, and we'll see that it has persisted in the browser, which means that it is correctly updating in the database. Let's just try it again. Clean the house now, we'll save, and then refresh our browser, and it is persisted and updated. All right, so now the next thing we want to do is we want to hook up the delete functionality. Again, this doesn't persist yet, and so we want to fix that problem. This is going to be very similar to our update task. So first let's go to our server and let's create a router.delete, and this is the syntax for deleting a to-do. And again, we're going to grab the ID, which we're going to use to find the item in our database to remove it from our database. And let's grab the ID from the request.params.id, and then let's do to-do.remove, and this syntax is very similar to before, id mongoose.types.object id object id id, and we are going to, well, let's do a callback here. So again, just same thing as before. We're not really going to do much here. If there's an error, let's console log the error, and then let's just put down here response.send to do deleted. Okay, and then on our front end in our factory, we're going to do something very similar to that. Again, let's comment this out because that is old code, and let's put in here http.delete, and then again, let's use the ES6 string interpolation, which is a great feature. And then we'll do to delete, since that's the variable that we're using. And then let's do here dot success response, and then in the response we're just going to say get tasks scope. So this logic right here will actually be done by our server now inside of that inside of this code right here. I spelled that wrong. And let's try that out. Let's refresh our server since we edited our server there. And then I'm going to refresh my browser. I'm going to try to delete, refresh, and it has persisted. They are now gone. So now we've hooked up everything. We have the create, we have the read, we have the edit, and we have the delete. So our app is basically finished now. There is one additional problem, though. You'll notice that if I create tasks with nothing in it, it will continue to create tasks and it'll save. And so we don't want tasks with nothing in them. There's a very easy fix for that. Or let's do this in our factory. For the create task here, if the input box is empty, so if scope.create task input, if it doesn't exist, we are just going to return. So let's try that. And again, this is just client side, so we don't need to do anything. So now we can click create task as many times as we want, and it will not create to-dos with nothing in them. And so now our app is basically finished. So there's actually a lot more that we can do with our app, such as adding in testing as well as deploying our app to something like Heroku. But for the purpose of this tutorial, we're basically finished now. If you want to see stuff about testing and about deployment, check out the repository. I will add those things to the repository as I finish those things. And so I know that this was a really long tutorial. Thanks so much for keeping up with me through this all, and I hope that you learned a lot. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.